You know that sound of a fire alarm, right? That deafening, panic-inducing scream? But imagine it goes off on a perfectly clear day. There's no smoke, no fire, nothing. That right there is what anxiety can feel like. And it is one of the most common, but also one of the most misunderstood mysteries of the human mind. So today, we are not just going to talk about it, we're going to solve it.
It happens out of nowhere. Suddenly, there's this crushing weight on your chest. Your heart is just hammering away like it's trying to get out. You're gasping for air, but it feels like your lungs are refusing to work. And in that terrifying moment, your brain screams the one question you never want to ask. Am I dying? But what if it's not your heart? What if the real emergency is a system-wide false alarm? A little glitch in your brain's ancient survival wiring that's absolutely convinced you're facing down a saber-toothed tiger, even when you're just sitting on your couch. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to treat this whole thing like a detective story. We're going to dust for prints, follow the clues, and figure out exactly how this internal alarm gets tripped, and, this is the most important part, how you can shut it off.
Okay, first things first. Every good investigation starts at the scene of the crime, and in this case, the scene is your own body, that whole physical experience of anxiety. We have to understand the mechanics of this false alarm before we can do anything else. So at the heart of all this, you've got two main culprits, fear and worry. Fear is that instant gut punch reaction. That's the panic. Worry, on the other hand, it's more like that low-level hum of dread in the background. And what's really fascinating is that these aren't just random feelings. Nope. They come from totally different circuits in your brain. A fear response is a great thing to have if a bear walks into your kitchen. It becomes a disorder when that exact same reaction happens and there's no bear. And that brings us to our number one person of interest, the amygdala. I want you to think of it as the brain's hypersensitive emotion detector, always scanning for trouble. This little almond-shaped bit of your brain is the command center that kicks off the entire fear response, sending out these urgent red alert signals to everyone else.
And here's where it gets wild. The amygdala does two things at the exact same time. First, it shoots a signal up to the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain, and that's what creates the emotional feeling of being scared. But simultaneously, it sends another signal down to your brainstem, and that is what triggers the physical alarm. Your heart starts racing, your blood pressure spikes. It's a two-pronged attack, hitting you with the mental and the physical panic all at once.
But wait, there's more. The amygdala doesn't stop there. It also pings the hypothalamus, which kicks off this whole hormonal cascade. Basically, your brain tells your adrenal glands to flood your entire body with stress hormones like cortisol. This is what gets you physically ready for a fight or to run for your life, even if there's absolutely nothing to fight or run from.
So the big question is, how does this whole system turn off? Well, this system, it's called the HPA axis, is supposed to have a built-in off switch. Cortisol is meant to circle back to the brain and say, hey, we're good, danger's over, you can calm down now. But when you're dealing with chronic stress, that feedback loop can actually break. Too much cortisol can damage the very parts of the brain that are supposed to hit the brakes. And the result? The alarm gets stuck in the on position. All right, we've officially analyzed the crime scene. We get how the false alarm works. So now it's time to bring in the usual suspects. What or who is actually pulling the fire alarm? Well, the answer is a lot more complicated than you might think.
Just look at this lineup. It's almost never just one bad guy. It's a whole crew of potential triggers working together. You might have genetics that give you a more sensitive alarm system to begin with. Or it could be long-term stress, old trauma, or even just not getting enough sleep. And then you have things like caffeine, hormonal shifts, even the way you breathe that can make the whole system wobbly and way more likely to sound a false alarm. It really shows you how many different angles we have to look at.
Okay, let's zoom in on a prime suspect that a lot of people miss: cortisol dysregulation. Now, we all know about high cortisol from stress, right? It revs you up. But get this. Low cortisol, which can happen after you've been stressed for a long time, can be just as bad. It messes with your blood sugar and can cause these random adrenaline surges that your brain has no idea what to do with. So it misinterprets them as a major threat and boom, panic attack.
And then we have suspect number 2, the imposter. I'm talking about a medical condition that's just pretending to be an anxiety disorder. Take hyperthyroidism, for example. That's when your thyroid gland goes into overdrive. It can give you a racing heart, tremors, and a constant feeling of being on edge. This is exactly why getting a full medical checkup is so important. You have to make sure you're solving the right mystery.
Okay, so we know how the alarm works, and we have our lineup of suspects. Now for the part you've been waiting for. What in the world do we do about it?
It is time to open up our cognitive toolkit. I'm going to give you the evidence-based tools you need to become your own lead detective and take back control.
First tool out of the box is called cognitive reframing. This is a huge part of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, and it is all about going after those unhelpful thoughts that are basically throwing gasoline on the anxiety fire. The goal here isn't to just force yourself to be positive. The goal is to be realistic, to challenge those distorted thoughts and swap them out for something that's actually balanced and true.
So how do you actually do it? Well, it's a pretty simple 4-step process. First, you got to catch that negative thought in the act. You know, the "I'm going to fail this test and my life will be over" kind of thought. Second, you put on your detective hat and examine the evidence. Have you studied? Have you passed tests before? Third, you name the distortion. In this case, that's called catastrophizing. And finally, you create a new, balanced thought. I prepared for this, and even if I don't get a perfect score, one test doesn't define my entire future. See the difference? Now, when you're right in the middle of that anxiety spiral, your mind is a runaway train to the worst-case scenario. The 5-4-3-2-1 technique is an amazing tool to pull the emergency brake. All you do is engage your senses. You name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can physically touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This literally forces your brain to disconnect from the anxious thoughts and plug back into the real world. It sounds simple, I know, but it is so effective.
All right, now for a tool that works on a purely physical level. I want you to meet your vagus nerve. This nerve is the superstar of your body's rest and digest system. It's the natural enemy of the fight or flight response. And the cool part is, you can actually turn it on yourself with really simple exercises. Things like deep belly breathing with a really long exhale, or humming, or even just splashing your face with cold water. All of these things tell your body, hey, we're safe.
So, we've got the toolkit. Now it's time to put these tools to work. This is the moment where you stop being a victim of the false alarm and you become the lead detective on your own case, actively solving the mystery of your own thoughts. I absolutely love this quote from the NHS because it frames this perfectly. You're not just arguing with your anxious thoughts. You are putting them on trial. You get to be the impartial judge, calmly weighing all the evidence to get to the actual truth.
And the goal here couldn't be clearer. We're not trying to force some kind of blind positivity on ourselves, like everything is perfect and everyone loves me. That's just as wrong as the negative thought. The goal is the balanced thought, right there in the middle, the judge's final verdict. It's not everyone hates me, it's, well, John might not be my biggest fan, but a lot of other people seem to like me just fine. It's realistic, it's based on evidence, and it takes all the power away from the negative thought.
Let's run through a quick case file together. So the situation is you didn't get a job you really wanted. The hot thought, that's the one that's causing all the pain, is there's no point in even trying anymore, I'll never get a job. You believe it 90%. Okay, Judge, let's look at the evidence against that thought. Well, they actually gave you some really good feedback, and you've gotten jobs you wanted before. You were qualified enough to get the interview in the first place. So what's the verdict? The balanced thought, right there in that last column. Okay, I didn't get this one job, but I've gotten jobs before. I'm going to use their feedback to get better and just keep going. See how that completely changes the feeling? It creates a path forward.
Look, solving one case is a massive win, but the real goal here is to prevent future crimes from ever happening. So this last part is all about taking everything we've just talked about and building your own personal, long-term plan for resilience.
And this is where I turn it over to you. This is where the real work begins. Take a second right now and just think, what are your most common hot thoughts? What are the ones that always show up and try to hijack your day? Just knowing what they are is the first, most powerful step to putting them on trial the second they show their face.
And finally, let's look ahead. Now that you understand the anatomy of your anxiety, now that you're armed with these tools, where do you want to be a year from now? Thinking about your goals isn't just daydreaming. It's actively creating a future where those false alarms have less and less power over you and where you are the one who's in control. This isn't an unsolvable mystery anymore. It's a blueprint for taking back your life.